Hi and welcome to my channel. I hope you'll stick around with me today to paint these sunflowers in a glass jar. Today I'm using my Sonnet and SeimiArt watercolors, my size 10 Intuition round brush, and my size 12 Royal Langnickel Filbert. I have my watercolor palette ready. I have 2 jars of water, one for rinsing my dirty brushes and one for painting. And today I'm using my 300 GSM watercolor paper by B Paper Company. This is a 9 by 12. Let's get started. I'm using my Indigo to start with. And I want to just go ahead and start with my jar. And so I'm brushing this wide area over here. I want to go ahead and start blending that some. I want this to be real wet. And I'm just trying to make sure it all stays very blended. So I'm trying not to let this dry as I go. Not being perfectionist about any of it. Okay. One of the great things about jars is I just think they're so forgiving. They're, you almost can't go wrong. The shape is forgiving. The water patterns inside, it just makes it easy to, just kind of be free about it and not have to overthink it. Okay, so I want to take a bit more of this indigo. Just start bringing it in over here. I just want a bit more. It's dark over here. Excuse me, dark. And I have quite a bit of work done over here, and so I can see some of the pulp, I guess, starting to kind of lift a bit. So just want to be careful about that. Because this is a bit drier, I can go ahead and work in some of the bottom of this jar. And some of these top areas too, they have those threads. I guess I'll blend this just a bit in the back. Just a bit. And I'm not going to worry about blending in all of these strokes. I want this to look like it has reflections, glare. Some of this darker is lifting out, and that's okay for me. And then I've rinsed my brush, and now I'm just going with clean water, dragging that brush off a bit, you can see, I hope. But now I just want to go right up alongside the bottom of this, and then to the side a bit, and just drop in a bit of this mixed pigment, just that's already been mixed with water, for a bit of shadow here, and just kind of blend that out. And I do want it to be darker, closer to the jar, so I really want to get some pigment up in that. Okay, let that dry a bit, and then I can come back and work on that if I feel like it needs it. But right now I actually am really happy. I'm not too sure it needs much more. I'd like to define this a bit more. I think it's dry enough to do that. Okay. All right, let's get started on some of the florals. For this, I'm using sunflowers, and since they are my largest and predominant flower, I want to start with them. So I'm just getting some of this yellow deep ready on my palette, And then I just want to go in with some big, but not necessarily perfect petals. Okay? And these petals, just have fun with them. They don't need to be perfect. Really enjoy the feel of pulling that petal down, widening the brush, and then going back to the top or coming back down that other side. A couple of different ways to do that. None is better than the other. It's just enjoying the feel of it. Honestly, petals and leaves are so satisfying to make. They're just a joy because they're almost like therapy. My goodness, maybe they are therapy. It's called art therapy for a reason. So I like to think it is quite therapeutic, and I just love the feel of that. I love the sensation of pulling those petals down, and I'm not worried about any darker portions or lighter portions. um, it's going to be okay. Now you'll notice down at the bottom um, I made these smaller. This is called foreshortening, and it's when the part of the flower that's close to you is kind of tilting upward, and so those petals will be somewhat shorter. And so that's why I do that. You know, it depends on the angle of your flower, but that's um, a really great thing to incorporate to kind of bring a just another level of maturity to your painting, and not necessarily realism, but somewhat. It does add some uh, I guess realism is the word, but it just makes that more identifiable, that it's not being looked at straight on. You know, if you make an arrangement or a bouquet and all the flowers face the viewer, it's not very realistic, and it's not quite as engaging. Now you can do that, but this is also another way to do it. It's the way that I have grown accustomed and really enjoy, and I like the challenge too of finding that angle. And you know, I try not to make it really um, too too perfectly, you know, expected. I don't know. I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm not trying to make any of it perfect, but that's what I like to do. I just want a little kind of a bud for one, starting up here. Not sure if you would call a little sunflower, a new sunflower, a bud. I'm not positive on that. I'm just adding some other layers of petals in between, and some of these little slashes. I just like to do that. Just some little interest in there. These do not have to be perfectly spaced in, you know, behind those existing petals, and in fact I think it looks a little more realistic maybe if they aren't just perfect. You can see this big round brush holds a lot of pigment. This is my size 10, I think. Yes, size 10 round. And you can paint for a very long time with it. It holds a lot of pigment. Okay, I love those. Just love how fiery sunflowers are. Okay, can let that dry a little. Honestly, I think it's dry enough to do another layer. And for this, I want to go in with my gold ochre. Now I want I want this to be a lighter wash of it, so I'm just diluting it a bit with my water. And you'll notice I used my rinse water, and that's because I'm fine with it kind of blending a bit with the existing color, the existing, just the pigment that's in there. I think it kind of helps actually to make the work, the piece, a bit more cohesive in color. You can see I'm trying to lift off a little piece of lint or something that was probably on my palette. I'm trying to lift that off with my brush, but there we go. It was a bit of a struggle bus. I did not wipe off my palette before I started today, and usually, you know, I use my palettes over and over and over, and I let the colors meld and work with what's existing on there, and I don't worry too much about it, but I do try to give them a a little damp wiping when I'm starting with one that has been used, just for that reason, that you know, I don't want to mess with the paints necessarily, but I do not care to have any little pieces of lint or dust in my palette. So I'm just getting some more little layers in there. And I don't want to overwork it, but you know, this is a big piece and I feel like it can handle it. These sunflowers have all these little layers, and they do not have to, every petal that you have does not have to have a new layer on top of it. And sometimes I do these layers down here very much in a sideways orientation. You know, you can have 2 petals over some of these. It's all permissible. It's your art, and just do what makes sense to you. That one is still just a little damp up there, so makes more sense to start here. And you know, just kind of keeping an eye on the values so that you do have something that's kind of cohesive. Okay, and I just want to go in with more of these slashy things, just things that might be like bits of petal, or yeah, maybe like a curled petal. You know, I'm not really sure. I just like to do them. I always like how they turn out. All right, good rinse there. I'm happy with these. And I want to go ahead and start in on some geraniums. Let's see. I like this dark red for geraniums. So here is my version of, this is more of an abstract style. But I'm going to go in here and just make some little petal strokes, very very loose, and not necessarily with the most rhyme or reason to them. Then I'm going to give my brush a decent rinse. It's all right if it's still kind of going pink. And then I'm going to brush these loose petal shapes. I kind of like to just touch into this pigment in several places. When I do this on a smaller scale, I can't always do that, but this, we're just touching this pigment, and you know, 4 or 5 or 2 or whatever little just these little strokes that are just, you know, not necessarily looking that petal-like. They don't have to. And then I like to go in, I still have a little pigment on my brush, I like to go in and fill just a few more little strokes in between there, and outside of there too, even, just for a little more, you know, a little more shadow, a few of the flowers kind of falling into shadow. And then you can go in with some pigment just on the very tip of your brush and touch. I just love to watch that. Just any of the places that you think need a bit more pigment, you know, as long as it's wet there, it will do that bleed. And that's fun to do. It's fun to watch. It makes a beautiful look. And you just get all of that, that graduated look from light to dark, dark to light. And you know, you can take your time with that. You can do it quick. You can take your time. But yeah, I love that. So I want to do maybe one or two more of those. It's going to be kind of tough. I underestimated the size of my jar. I like a little more of that bleed right here. So I just touched that with a bit of water so that I could touch this pigment in there. And see, it kind of didn't want to just spread because I really didn't put enough water first. So just go back and touch that a bit. And is it okay if there are some overlapping petals? Absolutely. And you can also kind of direct the pigment. So when you put fresh pigment in somewhere, you can kind of direct it to where you want it to go. Okay, and maybe one more just here. Just because it has more of a solid look in the center, and I like when they just flow a bit. Nothing wrong with any of it, but that's just personally what I like. So then I'm just rinsing my brush, and then we'll do another round of those. Let's see. Gosh, it's kind of tough because I have another kind of little branch thing I want in here. But I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and place it right here. And I want to kind of be thinking about, you know, how big those, I just went into the wrong red, went into my cherry red on my palette. But I just want to be kind of using the same size of strokes that I used before. I'm not going to stress about layout. I want it kind of rounded, but you know, one thing about geraniums is that they are kind of imperfect rounds sometimes, and sometimes they have these funny little offshoots, and you know, they're just not they're not necessarily that perfect of a flower. They have all these little mini flowers coming off of all these little stems, and there is a lot of just not necessarily a perfectly planned looking flower, you know what I mean? So, you know, it doesn't necessarily have this perfect symmetry to it, and you know, sometimes those little shoots are just kind of funny, just kind of randomly out there a little bit. Okay, I really am liking this. This one had a lot more bleed from the very beginning, I think. Okay, and then just kind of touching in and around there, just encouraging some more bleeds. Okay, I like it. Yeah. And I really quite like that this one is not perfectly round. That's sometimes that's my goal, and I don't always meet it. They're just fun to do, really. Okay, I like that. Ordinarily, I like 3 of something, but we may just go with 2 of those because it may be tough to fit a third in here. So I want to switch for a moment to my, Filbert, and I'm going to be using my dark purple, which tends to not be super dark. It's really more of a plum. And with this, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to create some stems. I want to make sure I have some of these down here. And I'll go into my jar and make some of those stems later, but I want them to be able to bleed, so I want to do those with the other stems at the same time. But I'm going to go up here and just making some stems. This is maybe kind of a eucalyptus leaf, and to do these you're just kind of alternating and making brush strokes that are not the same. That's really the key. And you know, going kind of across each other. I love doing these. They're so fun, always satisfying. I feel like they always have a good result. And then you can kind of come back and after having replenished the pigment on your brush, you know, go over some of the other areas so that you get this depth in a super easy manner. It's so easy. Barely an inconvenience. If you know, you know. Okay, I love that. And do I think we could have some down here? Absolutely. Just alternating how you hold and brush those. Yeah, for sure. Okay, love those. They're very fun. Maybe could have one going kind of behind this sunflower. And I don't know if you saw, but I kind of hit the sunflower petal with that. That's gonna be okay, y'all. We're not trying to make something that's gonna go in the Louvre. Don't worry about if, you know, yes, I want this behind, and so I'm gonna try to avoid those petals, but I'm not gonna freak out. Now, there might be something that could be a deal breaker, you know, and you'd have to go back and kind of scrub at it, but that's not a deal breaker for me. Okay, I like it. Just kind of that. I like this one kind of off on its own over here just a little bit. Get a little bit deeper pigment for a little more stem down here. Nice, cute. Okay, here's where we're gonna get to have some fun and kind of start bringing this just more together, I think. I'm gonna go back to my size 10, and I've got some clean water. I'm gonna get some of my olive green and get that ready on my palette. It's probably going to take quite a bit of it. And you know, I had a mixture of greens there on my palette, and they looked suited. I don't really care. You know, I'm not too concerned with if there's brown, or you know, like it looks like the right kind of green for me, so that's what I'm doing. So so to start, I just want to start getting in some of these sunflower leaves, and I kind of like for those to be messy. I want them generally coming out from under some of these sunflowers. And you know, I like for them to have some little white bits, so I kind of try to make them a bit more by dragging my brush a bit, so we see some highlight and whatnot, and then also maybe dropping in a bit more pigment near the flower. But just, you know, however you like to do these, I just like to give them a bit of a drag. I just think that's fun. They're so fun. And look, it's just already coming together. It may look a little homely, and that is okay because it's going to come together. So so maybe get some out here. Maybe pull this down so that the pigment is kind of coming out down here. Don't stress about it, you know, being entirely around that petal. Really, do not stress at all about that. And then this can go kind of behind this geranium a bit. Okay, I love it. really, really gonna get there. So I'm gonna do some of these geranium leaves. And here's how I like to do those. I'm gonna use this same olive. It doesn't matter. You could be using a tree green here. You can mix these greens. I love that. But I'm gonna put in some of these geranium leaves, and here's how I like to do it. I like to squiggle in like a crescent, sort of like a messy crescent shape. And I'm not going to do very many of these at a time because I want to go into the centers of them with yellow, and I want that yellow to bleed in. And I'm going to be sure to use a good amount of water. And the reason, and this is not always effective, but I love when it kind of makes that bloom look into the green. And I think that that is going to work there. But see how I'm blending that in with that green. And then you're going to see this is ferning into that green. And I love that. So back with this olive green. Let's make a couple of these down here. Just kind of, you know, squiggling that. Okay, and then just rinse that off. Plenty of water in this yellow. And then brushing that in, letting it touch everywhere. I may go in with a bit more of this green because these are not quite as dark as those. So just kind of helping that along because I want them to look cohesive. Oh, I love that. Okay. All right. Some more leaves and stems. Sometimes I like to do stems first. Sometimes I like to do leaves. This is a good balance of that because, you know, if you get some leaves in there, then you're not, I don't know, it can look kind of leggy and stuff if if you put too many, if you get stems in there first. And so this is how I generally like to do this. It's my own, you know, particular way, and it changes, you know, based on what I'm painting. So I think, you know, like many things, not really a right way necessarily. Okay, I'm gonna go in front of this guy. And I do like to kind of use a choppy line sometimes for my stems because I feel like that adds the look of a highlight, and so I think that that's, you know, an easy and interesting way to do that. You know, you do not have to do it my way. Get some of these long fibrous stems for the geraniums. Okay, and then I want a bit more of this olive pigment again, and we're going to go right down into this jar. And not worrying about perfection. Okay, and then some of this purple. I'm going to get this in there quick because I want to start, it's the wrong purple. I want to start adding a bit of water in that because I want to let those stems have some effect of bleed. So and again, they don't have to be perfect, just get them in there. And one more thing, I want kind of a brownish green, so just taking some of those in there. I don't know exactly where I'm going to have those, but okay, that may be a bit messy there, but that's okay. All right, wet brush, not completely, and I'm just touching in on some of these stems, just going to let them kind of bleed into this water that I'm brushing into here. And so that's why I wanted to work quickly, because I wanted these able to bleed. Now here's a quick cheat, and it's not a cheat, it's just what you can do. But after you've wet that, if they've gotten a bit drier than you wanted, after you've wet around there, go and push some of that pigment out. Sometimes you can do that. Some of that came out, but you can do that, or you can drop new pigment in on your stems and then let it bleed into that water. That's effective too. I don't want a ton of this going, but just enough. I just like that look of, you know, it looks wet in there. Now I want to go in with some, you know, I think just for this being a bit more satisfying of a look, let's go ahead and do the middles of the sunflowers. I've got my dark brown. You could use a black for this even, but this dark brown is such a satisfying black brown. It is really, really good. Now, one thing to be aware of, I don't know if you can see, I have some moisture on my ferrule, and I'm going with my cloth, I'm just turning that there in my cloth to remove that, because I don't want any of that, any of those drips to drip out into the middle of these sunflowers. Now, these are dry enough, they've been here for long enough. It might not would make the hugest difference, but it could, and it could take this dark pigment and kind of push it right into, you know, your petals, and nobody wants that. So here I am just dotting this dark pigment, and I'm dotting it kind of in circles. You do not have to, but the reason I do that sometimes is because sunflower seeds, when they're growing in the center of a sunflower, they kind of grow in this circular pattern, and you can see through here, and I left a bit there. That can be highlight, or that can be some of the, you know, the white from the seeds. I don't know. I don't care. It looks good, and so, you know, that's enough for me. And then I'm just going to go back, and I'm going to keep doing that with all of these sunflowers, kind of paying attention to the angle that I painted the sunflower, and then making sure I'm using an oval, a dotted oval, turning my brush here and there so that those, you know, your brush can kind of form a shape, and you can end up with just the same kind of print over and over again. But if you kind of turn as you go, then it's less likely to do that. But just being sure that I'm using an oval rather than a round, so that my flower is still, you know, keeping the idea of a direction. I like these to be really imperfect. You know, I'm not trying to paint a photograph. Okay, I love that. I think this is always the part where it just starts coming together. The centers of these sunflowers, they just make such a difference. It goes from, you know, oh, is this going to turn out, to wow, it's turning out. And, you know, I think it's so satisfying. Sunflowers are just, they're so deceptively easy, really. Just try them, do them, paint them. They're so good. All right, one last one. I love to see some of that other pigment peeking through. Kind of forgot to leave this guy a highlight area, but that's okay. Can maybe just leave some of that white open there, and not worry about it. He's happy. He's a cheerful little sunflower that only exists because I painted him. Nice. Fun. So fun. Okay, let's put in a few more leaves. I'd like to do something that's kind of in this brown green. And what I usually do for that, when I need more of it, is I take some green that's on my palette that I don't love, and I take some of my dark brown, and you know, just do that. And then I usually take a yellow, or like one of my burnt umber, something that just is a bit warmer to that, because I want this to have a hint of green in it. Okay, so let's go maybe down here, and I just want to make some of these multi-leaf stems. Okay, maybe coming from back here. Cute. Okay, and I'll come back to those because I do want to paint some little veins in them. Okay. These, I'm just really not being picky at all about, you know, how they're going. I did touch up one of the, oh, several actually of these leaves down here, because I didn't like that I had a just a water line in there, and that's you know, I think I could have let it go, but I like it better this way. So I didn't. Um, Maybe one more or two more of these. Kind of running out of that green. Some of it I'm running out of because I put it in a bad spot on my palette. So let's just mix a little of this. Let's see. Yeah. This is turning out a bit more green than the others, but that's okay. It's still lending to this cohesive look. I think it's fine. Maybe do a double leaf up here. Put a little more brown in it for this. Okay, now just in the leaves that have dried, I'll just go in and just kind of add a little detail. I am not really, you just gotta understand how much I'm not trying to be super realistic. I am not trying for everything to be even a line or a vein. I'm having a really loose hold on my brush, and then just kind of letting whatever happens happen. And the other thing to do here is to probably just with one easy stroke at a time, go down the stems a little, and that just kind of gives a little bit of a shadow and a highlight. If you can just do it in a way where you're not completely running it entirely where the other pigment was, but maybe just below, just touching, or just on part of it, just kind of gives you just a little more of depth. I'm kind of running this pigment on the underside of these, thinking that if it's interpreted as shadow, then it makes sense for it to be kind of on the underside. Now this guy here, he's a good example of why we try to mix all of the paint that we're using for any particular things that we have multiple of in our painting. But let me just tell you, Patricia is not going to stress over that, and for all I know, that's a different kind of leaf there, and it's the only one that you can see, but there are 20 more on the other side of the arrangement. Okay. We're not going to get bent out of shape about stuff like that. So okay, now I just want to brush in some just little brush strokes here and there inside of my arrangement, you know, not obscuring everything, but just giving some depth in there where you know, things would be a bit darker, or you know, certainly not have so much light, just as a result of, you know, being underneath these flowers, or, you know, other stems and what growing in there. So I, again, don't want to obscure everything. And I'm going back and getting other pigments, other green, so that so it's not just the same inside of there. And I see one more thing. Oh, I love this. My goodness. But this other thing that's needed is to go in with some green and add some little stems inside these geraniums, because they are these you know, multi. Oh, the light just changed. I hope the video's okay. But you know, they're these little V's where multiple flowers just kind of split off. So just add some V's here and there, not everywhere. Just adds so much. One little, you know, one little detail there makes such a difference. You could switch to a smaller brush if you like. I generally like to keep my same size brush unless there's really a desperate need to change. Just my personal, how I tend to paint. It's not right or wrong, obviously. Okay. Gosh, I love that. I love it. Could easily go in and add, just in, you know, in your green, in a real light wash, just some little background or additional leaves, just, you know, to kind of fill if you think they're needed. Not trying to fill every spot there, you don't want to do that, but just here and there, just some things kind of peeking out. I love this so much, and I'm actually going to call this finished. Easy. Gosh, I love this. Thanks so much for tuning in with me today. I hope you enjoyed this too. And this is a full shot of the completely finished painting. I'm so sorry that it ended up cropped during the tutorial. I'm not sure what happened. It was in the frame before I started, and then apparently by the time I hit record, some of it had shifted out of the frame. So my apologies on that. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging tight with me for the last 45 minutes. I enjoyed it so much. And as always, happy painting!